to Millennial Focus Group. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Kimmy.
And we're the Avocuties. Today, we're going to tell nerdy people how to write nerdy fiction. This is the basics of writing. And we're just going to give you some advice, writing tips, how to get started, and possibly how to avoid cliches and common mistakes for beginners. Number 1 is going to be world building. How do we create a world that feels realistic but is fantastical at the same time? Kimmy, would you like to start with your advice for number 1?
Definitely. So I love world building. I am a dungeon master for D&D, so world building is very fun. So what I like to do first is I like to think of what's going to go wrong in the world. So if I can think of what's going to go wrong, then I can think of what can go right, and I put the two together. So what I mean by that is what is going to be kind of the main aspect of my world. Is there an evil guy that runs part of it or wants to take it over? Is there different type of fairy life or any fantastical life in it? Is there aliens in it or something like that? So that there can also be different fun things to do there.
She likes to write about fairies.
I do. They're my favorite. I love the fae. But world building for me is the first thing that I actually do is I just find it more fun. There are ways to make different types of land to go to, different cities, different type of cultures, different languages. That's part of the world building. So for me, world building is very important. I do it first when I write. It's a good way to then find, how do I want to say this? To build walls, I guess, or to build the world. And so there are different like laws and rules that have to be followed.
Okay, limitations and laws of physics. What is reality in your world? What is possible?
Exactly.
If your character suddenly starts to fly when nobody else has flown so far, unless you draw a lot of attention to the fact that that is unusual and strange, it's going to be very confusing for your readers as well.
Yeah, so I like to do that so that there's not going to be continuity errors later on with my characters. There's already rules and laws forced by creating the world first.
That makes sense. Mm-hmm. See, I'm a little bit different. I always start with creating characters, but we'll get to that next. My only other tip to add for world building is that setting is important. And when I say setting, I don't just mean this took place in a city or this took place in the forest. That doesn't help your reader feel like they're there. What's important is to use imagery. Appeal to the 5 senses: taste, touch, sight, smell, and hearing. Describe really what is going on and be very specific in your writing. Instead of saying they were in the forest walking along, you should say something like the trees were rustling above them as shadows fell across the dirt path. The pine scent was thick in the air as the dirt kicked up beneath their feet. That's just an off-my-head example of ways to include kind of like texture for your readers. And it makes your readers feel like the characters are really there, and so they can be in the setting with them.
Yes, that is a great way to really make it feel real to the readers. The readers know fairies aren't actually there in our world, but you've created a world where they are, and it makes it believable by giving you that imagery.
Absolutely. So I said that I don't really create the world first. That's not my favorite part of writing. I always start with the character creation, and that's our number 2 tip for the basics of writing. When you're creating a character, I feel like it's very important to flesh out this character so that they feel real as well. They need personality traits as well as physical traits. They need a little bit of a backstory, and they need a direction to go in. What drives them? What's their purpose? So the way I write, I'm inspired to create characters, not places, and I revolve the world around what those characters want to accomplish and what those characters are capable of doing. So then I create a world that is possible for those characters to live in. if that makes sense. Which is the opposite of what Kimmy does when she creates the world first and then creates characters who could live in that world. So, Kim, do you have any questions for me about character creation that might help give our audience some advice?
Yes. One big thing was when you said that you give them a personality. When you give them that personality, what is like a main go-to for you, or what is really interesting like to read in characters when you read other books? What kind of personalities are you looking? Are you looking for like the broody type, or like, edgelord?
So my tastes have changed as I've gotten older. Obviously, I still like characters with a lot of conflict or problems, and characters with flaws. Your characters should not be perfect. They should not be immaculately clean. They should not be perfectly handsome or beautiful. They should not speak perfectly, walk perfectly, be good at athletics and art and school. That just makes for a boring, unrealistic character, and I'm immediately taken out of your world because that writing feels very immature to me. Now, there are cases where a character should be perfect for the purpose of the plot, but every character needs to be realistic. So even if people are perceiving them as perfect, maybe they're snobbish, maybe they're stuck up, maybe there's something going on underneath the surface that people don't understand or know about. But the most important thing about a character is that they have to feel relatable. So again, not making them too mysterious or making them too aggressive or too nice or too perfect. They shouldn't be too anything. They should act like human beings or act like elves or dwarves or fairies or whatever you want to write about. So characters might have a humorous side, a serious side, and a loving side, and you want to give little hints into all of the different aspects of their personality.
Gotcha. Yeah, that kind of answered what I was kind of going for there.
Okay, sorry I talked a lot there.
No, that was great. That was what I was trying to dig out of her, was how to not have like a perfect character and things like that. That is real good, guys.
Also, it's super important when creating a character. If you're creating it for yourself before you begin writing, then go into as much detail as possible. However, when you're introducing a character in a story, do not give a paragraph describing that character. That is a very, very common mistake seen for beginners, and it's an easy way for you to figure out what your character looks like, but your reader doesn't need to know all of their physical traits in one paragraph. Give them a little bit at a time. Hint it in the way that they speak. Hint it in the way that they move their hands while they talk, or the way that the light shines on their golden hair, or the way that their blue eyes stare intensely at their friend. These are ways that you can reveal character traits slowly, not too slowly so that people don't know what your character looks like, but slowly enough that it doesn't just feel like you're giving a very stale description of every single character we encounter.
I've read a lot of that. I am a huge fan fiction person, and I've read a lot of that. And yes, that is a very common mistake that a lot of people definitely make. So it's really hard to look past that once I'm like, oh, okay.
Along those lines, your character, again, needs to have flaws, and your character needs to have conflict. And conflict is our number 3.
So our third point that we're going to get to is conflict. So conflict both in story and character. So when I build a world, that's one of the things I said that's in my world is conflict. That's the way I kind of start the story. So something is already happening in the world before I even create characters that the characters are going to interact with. So like I said, bad guy trying to take over the world, or a war going on between fays, courts, or things like that. So conflict for me is really fun. It needs to not just be like top level conflict. It can't just be this bad guy wants to take over the world because he's bad. That's not fun. That's not fair. Really dig deep when looking for conflict in your story. Don't make the bad guy only bad, because the bad guy needs to think he's doing good. I don't know how else to express that. Like, in his eyes, it's the right thing that needs to happen so that it makes you really think. That is what really creates great conflict in a story. Both sides have to be right. So.
It needs to be complex, like she's saying. In the English world, we call that external conflict versus internal conflict. There should be external conflict, the bad guy wants to take over the world, but there should also be internal conflict with the bad guy and the good guy. In other words, with the antagonist and the protagonist. So maybe the antagonist has internal conflict because he is frustrated with the way that the country is being run, so he wants to take over, and that way nobody can abuse his people anymore. The protagonist has internal conflict, wondering whether or not they can truly stand up to this great enemy, wondering whether or not they're worthy, whether or not they're going to be able to accomplish these tasks that are set before them. Maybe they have internal conflict because part of them agrees with the antagonist, but in the end they have to resolve that external conflict, which is stopping the bad guy and returning peace to their homeland. Mm-hmm. I also wanted to note that conflict does not have to be this huge, large-scale conflict all the time. If you're writing a short story or you're writing about characters for fun, then conflict can be something small. Conflict can be the main character's mother forgot to say happy birthday to them, and this leads to other insecurities in the main character. Maybe the conflict is about a relationship ending or something along those lines. It does not always have to be really huge, impossible things that don't ever happen in real life, because that makes it less relatable for your readers. If you like to write fan fiction, maybe you're going to do a little snippet of your favorite character's life and what if they were in this situation that feels a little bit more realistic. Again, like a breakup, like their parent is forgetting something that's important to them. They feel pressure from their best friend to always be there for them. Something like that. It could be really anything. Mm-hmm. But there has to be conflict. You cannot write something that's only happy. Oh, well, I want to write about my characters finding a happy ending and their daily lives after that. If there's no conflict, it gets extremely boring extremely fast. Again, even if it's internal conflict, there has to be conflict present in your story.
That is a really, really good point. And I think it'll bring us to our next point, because this one's really big for me. If there's conflict, there has to be resolution. I am not one to be left on a cliffhanger. Please don't do that to me. I mean, I will come back. I always will. But after a while, it's like the Grey's Anatomy. Something bad just continues to happen. There has to be resolution. And I really like writing the resolution. What I like to do when I write stories is I will actually write scenes out. Sometimes I start with resolution and then I go back and write the conflict that led to that.
Interesting.
Yeah, sometimes I write the beginning and then I write the end and then I write the middle. But resolution is very important. Try not to make it perfect resolution. I mean, with a love story, it's a happy ever after. But if it's too perfect, I just don't feel like it's the right ending. I feel like something's missing. Like it can't always be perfect. I don't know. That's just me. That's my opinion.
That makes it more relatable if it's not perfect. And for those of you who don't know, resolution is when the problem is solved. There's no longer any conflict for that character, or at least that specific conflict. So you don't always have to have a happy ending. You don't always have to end the main conflict in your first chapter or your first story. But there should be multiple conflicts throughout your story, some small, some large, and there should be multiple resolutions throughout the story leading up to the main resolution, which is when the main conflict is solved. So some beginning writers tend to try to make their main character sympathetic and very edgy by constantly having bad thing after bad thing happen to them. Oh, how are they going to solve these problems? What are they going to do? their best friend died, and now their mom is dead, and now their house burned to the ground, and oh my god, this is no longer any fun to read. It's not realistic. It seems whiny. It's a little too intense. You can achieve these intense emotions without piling problem upon problem. Give little resolutions, little bright sides, if you will, throughout the story to even out the tone and the pace and to keep it from sounding like an edgelord's diary.
I've read a lot of those too.
Yeah.
That one mostly on Wattpad, but that's okay.
That's okay.
That's okay.
We're all here to get better, to make our
yeah.
writing more realistic.
Definitely.
Do we have anything else to say about resolution?
I like sad resolutions. Like she said that a little bit ago, resolutions don't always have to be happy, but they do need to finish the conflict. Sometimes bad stuff does happen, and it does solve the issue. I really think that's great writing when somebody can do that well. That's hard. Happy endings are great because everybody likes a happy ending. But to do a really good sad ending or sad resolution to something, and that will bring out like a certain set of emotions that your readers may not even realize they've like gotten to experience before. I do really like that. I mean, I like a book that can make me cry. I do.
You'll win Kimmy's heart.
Every time.
You'll win my heart if you give it a happy ending. Number 5, our final point for basics to writing: show, don't tell.
Okay, so like I stated before, I do read a lot of fan fiction, and now fan fiction, so you guys know, is not only just taking characters or plots that already exist and writing about them, even though that's mainly what it is. A lot of people like to take their own initiative with maybe just the characters and create something new, or they take the world and put new characters in the world.
Or maybe you're writing fiction that is totally 100% you.
Oh yeah, totally 100% you. When I read though these fan fictions, the biggest mistake is they just tell me everything. They tell me the room was dark and the lights were off. The room was dark. He couldn't see. He tripped over the couch. He landed on his face. That writing right there, I'm not about, but writing something as simple then the bruise came from when he had tripped over the stairs tripped over the couch when the power went out. I get the room was pitch black. I get how he got his face hitting the floor, but you didn't tell me. It just kind of was a little bit better that way. It was showing me, the brightness of the bruise, things like that.
It was more descriptive. Imagery helps with that. And that was a really good example, Kimmy.
Thank you.
Another way to avoid telling is not to write huge summary paragraphs. Keep us in the action. Keep us as the readers in the moment. Show us conversations. Show us the character moving from one side of the room to the other and picking up his cup of coffee. Show us the intense arguments and the expression on the person's face when they suddenly have this emotion come over them. Don't just summarize in a huge paragraph all of the events of your story, because then again, it's going to feel immature, it's going to feel very rushed, and I can't get into the moment if you are summarizing the important parts of the story. Now, there are places for summary, usually at the beginning of a scene or the end of a scene or just after a time skip, something along those lines. But for the most part, keep your readers in the moment, present. Skip the boring little details. We don't need to know every street they turned on to get to their destination, okay? But we do need to know all of the events that led up to their feelings, their conflict, their resolution, everything that's important in a story.
Oh yeah, and a great way is metaphors and similes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so like an example is, Joshua felt the bitterness in his heart just the same as the coffee he sipped that morning at the shop on the corner. That's just something, something like that. That is very nice for me, instead of, he felt bitter about the issue, and he went, and got coffee that morning and sat there and, did this, did that, did that. Instead, it was just very short. I liked it. I get that, you made that cool connection between what he was doing versus how he felt. That's always really, really good way to do that.
It's also more interesting than saying something like, he was angry. Oh my god. Don't overuse the words angry, sad, and happy. Those are the most often felt emotions, but they're very cliche. Try to find synonyms for those words. Try to find something more specific and more potent and powerful than happy, sad, or angry.
Oh yeah, and there's many different words you can use for them, and then also keep in mind connotation when it comes to those words, because they both might mean the same thing, but one could be seen as bad and one can be seen as good. So depending on the emotion of your paragraph, what you're feeling at that time, that's the kind of words to choose. It's very fun. I like looking through a thesaurus.
Thesaurus, yeah.
It's not a dinosaur. It's a book. I found this out this year.
Go to thesaurus.com. It's fun.
Oh, yeah. It is really fun.
And it will tell you how to use the words correctly in a sentence. Are there any other ideas that we would like to give our listeners for today?
Right. Just write. Don't be afraid that you have to finish it. Like I said, I write scenes. I probably have over 100 different scenes from many different stories I want to do, and that's all they are. They're just scenes between characters. There may not be a beginning to the story or an end to the story. Just when it comes to you, write.
Agreed. Write a little bit, write a lot. Not every story has to be finished if you're just writing to get better. Also, don't stress out about it being perfect the first time. This is something I struggle with every time I sit down to write. I want to express myself and how the story should be the first time I sit down to write it. But people, it's impossible to do that, okay? It might be possible to create a very successful short story in one go, but especially if you're sitting down to write a short novel or something with chapters and parts, then just write it out. You can always go back and edit later. Also, rely on people that you trust to read and give you honest feedback. That has helped me out a lot in my writing, was having some people tell me, hey, I wasn't sure that I really understood this part of your story. Could you make that clear? Or, hey, this word choice here does not fit your tone. You should pick a different word. You're going to hear stuff like that, but it's going to help you become a better writer.
Yes, definitely. Positive feedback it's important because you may not see it the way you read it, but it's great when somebody else reads it because then before you make it public, you kind of already know you've appealed to somebody else.
Let's give our audience a writing prompt so that if they're interested in doing a little short piece for this writing prompt, they can share it with our other millennials or they can share it with us. And if they want, we can give them a little bit of feedback based on our 5 basics to writing. Do you have any ideas for a cool prompt for our audience to respond to?
Actually, I kind of do.
Go for it.
Okay, so your prompt. You wake up to your normal alarm, you hop out of bed, and you're greeted by your mom in the hallway who has a little cupcake with a birthday candle on it. She smiles and says, "Happy birthday." Only you remembered your birthday party was yesterday, and it's the same cupcake.
Really?
I'm just kidding.
Groundhog Day? Really? Or what's that horror movie that just came out?
Oh, Happy Die Day?
Happy Death Day. Okay, Kim.
No.
Okay, that's not a bad prompt. I'm just making fun of you because
I know, I like it.
Really, Groundhog Day? Okay.
It's always a good one.
Okay, so write that if you want. Here's my prompt to you. You are writing from the perspective of an animal. You cannot use the animal's name because you are that animal and you don't refer to yourself as a cat or a tiger or an eagle. So, write from the perspective of an animal. Maybe it's their daily life. Maybe they're going on a little adventure. But you cannot use the name of the animal in your writing. And people have to be able to tell what animal it is.
That is awesome. I'll do that.
Isn't it fun? Doesn't that sound so fun?
It does sound like a lot of fun. I'm gonna do this. And I'll put it up.
Yeah, we should do each other's.
Oh,
you
gosh.
do the animal one. I'll do Happy Death Day / Groundhog's Day. And then we'll post some up for our viewers to look at. We'll probably put it on our Facebook page, and we'll encourage you to do the same.
Oh, definitely. So you can find us on Facebook at MFG Podcast or Millennial Focus Group. You can look us up both ways. We're on Twitter. You can tweet us at Avocado Toasters. We're on Instagram, MFG Podcast. We are also available via email, mfgpodcast@gmail.com. Obviously, you can download us on Podbean and iTunes. Am I forgetting anything?
You can search us on YouTube now. Search for Millennial Focus Group.
I will always forget the YouTube channel, though we make videos. But yes, definitely, we definitely want to hear what you've written for us, and I think this is going to be a lot of fun, guys.
It does sound a lot of fun. Okay, please go for it. Again, don't be afraid. Practicing makes you better. I'm not going to say perfect, but practicing will make you better, and feedback will make you better. Thanks for listening or watching us tonight. Have a great evening, millennials, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Bye.
Bye.